Hello and welcome to Module 3. So I haven't had a chance to grade Module 2 yet, but I should be able to get to that early this week. I hope to. We have a lot of bigger concepts that we're covering early on. I want to make sure that everyone has a proper theoretical framework before you're asked to do more personal work. So I'm going to ask that you do some personal work this discussion board with some broad, perhaps some really specific brush strokes. It depends on how the prompt impacts you. So let's get to that because really it's about the discussion board, right? So there's a lot of information to consider, and I want to go ahead and throw that out there. So you'll notice I haven't leaned into the textbook very much yet, and that's okay. There's some intentionality behind that. So going into our class, you can see, hopefully, let me turn this TV down. That's annoying. That needs to be off. Okay, sorry about that. Um, Here it is. So here's module 3. And you'll notice it's titled Overarching Perspectives. And there's some intentionality to that too. We're still digging into the idea that multicultural counseling is a subset of social psychology, and it truly is. It's really applied social psychology. So here's our outline. You're welcome to read through that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I am going to spend a lot of time on our lecture. So our lecture portion is quite extensive this week. I'm not requiring that you dig into the text a lot. So this is your supplementary material. And there's quite a bit here. There's quite a bit to consider. And this might be a longer lecture. I hate to say that, but I don't know how else to frame it. So I want to early on introduce some concepts from social psychology. See, I really thoroughly dog-eared this book when I took it. I took the class and taught it, and I'm going to teach it again in the spring. I've been remotivated by this class to jump back into an area of a lot of interest for me. So I want to go over some social psychological concepts like we did last week. I want to dig into a deeper understanding of our understanding of others. The uh, theory put forth by Robert Kegan and his orders of consciousness is to me the most comprehensive understanding of our place in the world and in society with other people. So I am leaning into that and also putting in play these other bigger theoretical frameworks like Piaget's stages of development, like Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems, harkening back to week one. I'm going to also throw in Marsh's stages of identity formation. I think that's important too when Kegan starts to talk about the self-authoring mind. And we'll talk about what that is here in our discussion. If you ever get lost and you're like, I can't follow you, Randolph, I don't know what you're saying, I do have some embedded links to listen to Robert Kagan himself on his theory. That's really, I would say, this is the meat and potatoes of week 3 is understanding Kegan's theoretical perspective on human development, orders of consciousness, and how that interacts and plays into what we want to do as counselors. So we'll also cover the fundamental attribution error that's as an implication of these things. And I would argue of Kegan's theory that it kind of predicts the fundamental attribution error because people don't have the ability to necessarily put themselves in the shoes of another person in their own systems, in their own ecological surroundings. It's harder. It's easy to say we have empathy. It's much harder to actually have empathy. And then so I don't get to this, and I might add this toward the end of the week. I always have the option to add some more. So cognitive complexity. These will be very abstract ideas, and it will challenge you. it challenged me a lot. And I read the book, and I didn't have the cliff notes, and I didn't have somebody explaining it to me like I'm going to explain it to you. So, but I think also when you look at what Keegan's doing, and we later go on to multicultural counseling competency and the social justice counseling competencies, you'll understand where this you'll better understand these frameworks. It's not these people just didn't pull these ideas out of the air. They've been existing in academic circles and theoretically. So let's jump straight in, and that's where we're going. So let's jump straight into social psychology concepts. Uh, these should be basic if you took social psychology a long time ago. There are such, or sociology, there's things called social norms. And these are the rules, unwritten rules of behavior that we're supposed to be, assimilating to, that we're supposed to, as people, ascribe to in a society, right? So there's these social norms, and these norms can be familial norms. But so think again, this ecology, think of Bronfenbrenner's ecology, like they're your microsystem. Your microsystem might have specific behavioral norms. Your exosystem too might have these norms that interact with each other. The macrosystem certainly exerts norms on us. Mesosystem, and macrosystem, they exert norms, their norms on us, that where we have ascribed patterns of behavior that we have to, make sure that we're ascribing to. Sorry, I'm running out of vocabulary because I've been writing a lot. Um, and so there's different types of norms and mores. So mores are more like, okay, here's the morals of the society. So folkways, again, maybe think of what's in your microsystem or mesosystem. Mores are deeply ingrained in a society's moral fabric. So think more macro system here. Such as lying or cheating can result in social ostracism or strong disapproval. And then you have such things as taboos, and a lot of these things might be, illegal, and so maybe face punishment or ostracization, uh, for violating a taboo. So again, think about those on overlaying that ecological model. And so there's some related concepts that go along with these. For instance, assimilation. So let's say that you have well, I'll throw one out there. So, think of conventional United States 1950s type of culture where you have and maybe traditional cultures where you have a male breadwinner. The male works and the female stays at home. And I would argue that there are also a lot of cultures still to this day that ascribe to that sort of those sort of norms and mores. I'd say that those are mores. They're more deeply embedded in the society. And so the degree to which somebody assimilates. So think again about that cognitive dissonance in Festinger. You may not have jumped into that article. I had quite a few articles last week, but Festinger talks about this cognitive dissonance. Festinger was dealing with people that were cult members, and when the end didn't come, how do I make sense of this? The dissonance was strong, and so some people assimilate rather than go against folkways or mores, even if it's not a part of their identity. At the end of the day, really, what we're going to talk about is our identity, and your I would argue your clients' identities as well. And then internalization. Internalization is the degree to which you internalize these mores, these norms. And so you can talk about internalized misogyny or internalized racism. That might be somebody who is a member of, kind of like, well, my example was just about kind of a patriarchal society where, males have economic control and influence. Well, if you had a female that, okay, that's who they've, become accustomed to, like that's the kind of ideal situation that they want. One might say that they internalize those values or those norms. Um, and you can also have social sanctions. Social sanctions can uh, that's helping to people, to stay compliant. When we were talking, when we mentioned groupthink, there's things called mind guards and people that are in the trap of groupthink. And if people, stray away from, the norms of that group, they might face social sanctions, punishments for nonconformity. There's also something that's interesting. I threw it in here. I'm not going to connect it right now, but maybe later. It's called pluralistic ignorance. And that is within a group that is, think of somebody that's engaged or in a group that's really embedded this group think where, anybody that strays out of like the conformity or the 100% agreement lockstep with all these ideas, there might be a lot of people in that group that don't agree with everything in the group, and they might have some very strong opinions otherwise, but they have this pluralistic ignorance because nobody will speak up. And that's a thing too. So think about Solomon Asch and the line experiment where, that pressure that conformity to say, oh my gosh, yeah, that line is the same length. It's just something as simple as the length of a line, but people still, a third of the time were influenced to either lie or truly believe that the line was the same length. So again, this pluralistic ignorance can exist. So you can see where I'm applying these concepts that we've already talked about. I would argue you really need to be a strong student of social psychology to understand multicultural counseling. And then, of course, we have this thing called ethnocentrism. And I think this will become clearer as we talk about Kegan's orders of consciousness. This is the tendency to view one's own cultural norms as the correct standard by which to judge other cultures. There's some other key concepts that are important to consider. Uh, so, for instance, in-group in social psychology, the in-group would be somebody who is in uh, your own your culturally identified group. So, um, gosh, and really this could exist on different levels. I'm trying to get, think of microsystem, exosystem, mesosystem, macrosystem, but it really just depends on the individual and how they identify. If they identify themselves as as a as a as a group, a member of a certain group, then I'd say that they're an in-group member versus an out-group member. And again, this is very individualized. On a certain level in that okay, well, that person's different from me. They belong to this other group. They're an out-group member. But these are things important to. I don't want to be signed out. Sorry, that was a weird message. Hopefully you saw that. Threw me for a loop. The biases can exist for outgroup members. Bias is a systematic tendency to think, feel, or act in ways that are prejudiced against members of another group or another group itself or category. So social psychologists distinguish between explicit bias, these conscious attitudes that you'll talk about, which I would argue have become much more prevalent on social media because of the social distance that's involved in that, or implicit bias. Most people say, well, I'm not biased, but then when they take these implicit tests, it comes out, yeah, you really did have some bias. So there's talking about some studies here. One of the studies that stands out that I remember teaching from this book is that they had they did a sample of people who were um, property managers. And so they looked at how they reacted to different last names. So a different last name of say, Jackson, or a different last name of, let's say, Smith, or a different last name of Gonzalez, or a different last name of, Ali. And so what they did is they looked and they compared the property managers, and all it was based on the last name that they were given on a sheet, what their disposition was to helping or not helping them meet their rent so like they were delinquent in their rent payment. And the Smith category got the most gracious treatment out of the other categories. The other categories were, immediate eviction, eviction notice. They can take different actions. So there's these ways that we can have, both explicit and implicit bias. The IAT implicit apperception test is a measurement of the implicit bias. We'll get to that later. A stereotype is something, that you just apply like, hey, that member's a member of this group. They're going to meet these stereotypes, and I'm going to, just say that they're going to be like this, insert X. Racism is a prejudice based and discrimination based on race. Sexism is prejudice and discrimination based on sex or gender. Misogyny is certainly directed against women. Ageism is often prejudicing, stereotyping, or discrimination toward older adults. I would say there's also some type of reverse ageism in our society where younger people are also marginalized. And then you can also see this in classism, where the socioeconomic status is inferred to be a dispositional versus a situational issue. And that has to do with the fundamental attribution error. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to stop there because that was a lot to chew on, and I'm going to make a separate video on Keegan.